People who are calling for a ceasefire now do not understand Hamas.
Ceasefire now. President Biden and Blinken, listen to what people are telling you, especially the young people and lots of Jews.
It is becoming incredibly tough to both follow and cover this conflict without losing my mind. Seeing the amount of people in power, both politicians, former politicians, which I'll get to, thought leader, just people that have actual power to do something, not even acknowledge that a ceasefire would be a good thing. It's maddening. At the same time, there are millions of people all around the world standing up, protesting in the streets, calling for a ceasefire, calling for the end of the occupation that is helping to, I wouldn't say lift my spirits, because it's kind of hard for my spirits to be lifted in the middle of all this, but to at least give me hope that most people aren't fucking crazy. So in this video, I'm going to show you both. And I'm going to give you the context of what else is going on right now. There is so much news. There's so much news out of this entire Israel-Gaza conflict. And calling it a conflict is really doing a disservice to what's going on. The Israeli government, the far-right-wing Israeli apartheid government, is continuing to bombard innocent civilians in Gaza with bombs. Half of them children. And the numbers are so out of whack from one side compared to the other that anybody with any sort of sane mind should be able to tell what the hell is going on. So first, there are reasons why I choose sources like CNN and PBS here in a second, Reuters later on. Reuters. There, a moment of levity for myself, mispronouncing Reuters. It's because people that are not convinced or maybe are just falling into this conflict now, you have to understand that, left-wing outlets, actual human rights groups have been talking about this stuff forever. It's just now finally occasionally being recognized by other mainstream places. So CNN World here showcasing the before and after of satellite images showing destruction in Gaza. Really showing you, poking a massive hole into the idea that Israel is they're just targeting Hamas. They just want to get out these terrorists. Oh, Hamas, really bad. We got to get them out. Then why are you leveling entire villages? This is before, after. Before, after. Imagine the roles were reversed. There was a Muslim state, and they were occupying Jewish people in Gaza, controlling the borders, bombarding them with bombs, killing thousands of children. Would there be any question at all about what's going on here? But the roles are reversed. And of course, the Israeli government, a massive ally of the US, the UK, Europe, Canada, so they're allowed to go on doing this. Absolutely disgusting. So look, this goes on and on and on. I'll link to this below because I'll be here all day. Showing you this is not, we're just targeting Hamas. That one building there, no. There's a guy in Hamas in that building. No, it's the entire city block. So they've also stepped up raids and strikes in the West Bank. West Bank, guess what? Not controlled by Hamas. What's the excuse now? Oh, but there's Hamas in West Bank. We got to bomb them too. Is that how all countries solve their conflicts? How all countries deal with criminals? They just indiscriminately bomb giant city blocks, refugee camps. Save the Children here, writing, the number of children reportedly killed in just 3 weeks in Gaza is more than the number killed in armed conflict globally across more than 20 countries over the course of a whole year for the last 3 years. So to get specific on this This is as of yesterday. The numbers, of course, are always increasing. But 3,195 children killed in 3 weeks surpasses annual numbers of children killed in conflict zones since 2019. I'm on the side of not bombing children. If you are on the side of bombing children, I got nothing to say to you. Your brain is broken. Dr. Andreas Krieg here. This is quoting a Israeli official, this clown here. Quote, "There is no population in Gaza. There are 2.5 million terrorists." Calling the entire population of Gaza terrorists. Newborns, children, all terrorists. Dr. Andreas Krieg writes here, "I've been involved in professional military education for 13 years with officers from all over the world of all ranks. This level of dehumanization of the enemy and civilians I have never come across." And this isn't just, one random Israeli official. We're talking about all of them. Everyone in power in Israel is saying this, including their media. Now, I shouldn't say not all Israeli media, as I've quoted before. There are many articles from the Times of Israel, others pointing out that there is a lot of anger towards Netanyahu. They want the government out. But there is media like this that is just fully in support of what is going on and claiming they are all terrorists. Here is the Israeli TV is saying that they killed 7,546 terrorists. Ahmed writing here, "I happen to know 14 of these terrorists. These are my nieces and nephews whose age range between 1 to 13 years. So this is what he's talking about. 7,000 plus terrorists we eliminated. That's how they are categorizing all the civilians' death. They're all terrorists. Now let's get to another clown, Hillary Clinton. In conversation with Nora O'Donnell, here is what Hillary Clinton said to the idea of a ceasefire.
People who are calling for a ceasefire now do not understand Hamas. That is not possible. It would be such a gift to Hamas because they would spend whatever time there was a ceasefire in effect rebuilding their armaments, creating stronger positions to be able to fend off an eventual assault by the Israelis. So we're in a very different world. I don't think it had to be the world we're in, but that's where we are, and we've got to figure our way forward through it.
The people that are asking for a ceasefire right now are prioritizing human life. If you are against a ceasefire, then naturally you are for the right-wing Israeli government continuing to bomb indiscriminately, killing thousands of civilians. Again, half of them children, half of Gazans are children. Hillary Clinton is for bombing children, which really is not surprising. But this goes to the thought process that the majority of those in power in the West have. So Hillary, of course, thankfully, not in any kind of power right now, but her perspective is shared by the furthest right Republican and the vast majority of Democrats. It's an open admission that you do not care at all for the lives of Palestinians. There is nothing else to take from that. This is the reality of the situation. This is from the Washington Post. At least 8,306 people in Gaza have been killed in the conflict and more than 21,048 wounded, the Gaza Health Ministry said. The Israeli death toll reported by Israeli authorities has not increased since at least October 16th, hovering around 1,400 people killed, with more than 5,400 injured. So, when one side continues to bomb, killing civilians every single day, and the numbers are this high, erase the names, forget who's doing what. Who would you think is causing more destruction? Who would you think are terrorists? Now, you could argue both are, for good reason. Both sides killed civilians. But when one side continues to kill civilians while the other side is no longer suffering those sorts of numbers, what can you possibly take from this except for the fact that the Israeli government are committing terrorist acts? That is clearly what is going on here, while the world's superpowers in the West continue to support them. And we should be clear. I have to be clear again, because there is so much real anti-Semitism in the world that it's important not to conflate Jewish people with the Israeli government. The Israeli government is a government, a far right-wing Israeli government that, of course, we can criticize because it is a government. We can criticize any government. That is a government. This is a government that is doing this. This is not on Jewish people. Israel does not equal Jewish people. These are not the same thing, just as Hamas does not mean Palestinians. So it's important to separate the two things because there is a lot of propaganda out there, a lot of misinformation about who represents what. It's very important to note here. We are talking about the Israeli government committing these acts. And as I'll get to, you have many Jewish human rights groups standing up in support of a ceasefire. In addition to, of course, standing up to end the occupation that is being committed by the Israeli government. So here's an example of some of that hope that I was talking about earlier. Here is celebrated Hunter College professor Rosalind Pachetsky, who was arrested at a sit-in organized by Jewish American activists, Jewish Voice for Peace, in New York City. Check this out.
Palestinians have been the victims of oppression for 75 years, and it has to stop. That's why we're here, to say not in our name. I am older than the state of Israel.
There's Jewish prayers in the background. The sun is going down, and it's the Jewish Sabbath.
It is. And on Shabbat, we have to pray. We have to recommit ourselves to justice. I believe that Judaism and Jewish ethics, this is how I grew up thinking, are about justice and about Rabbi Hillel's statement, if I am not for myself, who am I? And if I'm only for me, what am I doing here? I glossed over it a little bit. And if not now, when? Now. Peace now. Ceasefire now. President Biden and Blinken, listen to what people are telling you, especially the young people and lots of Jews.
So that interview was from Democracy Now! And again, that event organized by Jewish Voice for Peace, one of the many human rights groups standing up for a ceasefire and continuing to be against Israel's occupation and ongoing apartheid of Palestinians. Really good to see that. And just the contrast between this college professor and this mass of people compared to someone like, Hillary Clinton and those like her with their thought process of being against a ceasefire. It really shows you where the masses are. And, you can poll random people on the street about this issue, and it's kind of 50-50, though it's leaning more and more in the direction of understanding the conflict. But when you see people that actually know what are going on, like these human rights activists and politicians, and just the difference there are many more human rights activists that are aware of these atrocities compared to the politicians in power who are also aware but not willing to challenge that power. A few last things here. So this is, and there was, as I said at the beginning, there is so much that I could be covering, so much that I wish I had the time to cover, wish I had a staff, people to cover. There have been journalists, at least I know in Canada, that have been let go from their job, fired, because they spoke up on social media in support of Palestinian life. And that's one example. There are people that are afraid to speak their mind on this issue because their boss might see it. Those that aren't even in news. So this is an ongoing issue. But that's, again, a story that I wish I could have folded into here, just didn't have the time to bring it in. But You also have this. Reporters Without Borders concludes in a video investigation that Reuters photographer Issam Abdallah and other journalists were deliberately targeted by the Israeli military while reporting in southern Lebanon. And there is a whole report on this. I will link to it below. You can read more into it. I just wanted to show you that this is going on. This is another example of the Israeli government killing journalists. This is not out of the ordinary for them. So, well before this conflict, they've been doing this. There was, of course, the high-profile example recently in the past year as well, or the past couple of years, of a journalist being targeted. And then eventually Israel had to admit that, yeah, we did this, even though initially they claimed they didn't. But again, that goes to why it's very hard to trust the Israeli government in what they claim they didn't do. But Reuters here covering this as well. Reuters journalist killed while in Lebanon in targeted strike. So again, I'll link to this below. It's in depth. There's a whole video they have on this, so you can check that out as well. And a few last things here. David Cleon tweeting out, I'm almost 40, unmistakably Jewish, and have experienced real anti-Semitism in America a single-digit number of times, none of which were since October 7th, when the Hamas attack happened. Our government is slaughtering Palestinian kids by the thousands. I think it would behoove us to focus on that. There are real anti-Semitic incidents in this country, from random Nazi graffiti to Tree of Life, but some insane share of what's being described as anti-Semitism right now is literally just pro-Palestine advocacy that many Jews have been taught to regard as inherently anti-Semitic. So look, of course I can't speak to this. I did not grow up with this sort of worldview or in this sort of environment, but it would help to explain why it seems like people who are otherwise solid and in the right mind have just completely lost their mind on this issue specifically and have no regard at all for Palestinian life. But again, this is, David Cleon's perspective here, but I think it's one worth noting. Last thing, I saw this shared by Timur Hussein. This is, I assume, a sign at one of these human rights protests saying, quote, if you've ever wondered what you'd have done during American slavery, the Holocaust, Canada's genocide of indigenous peoples, and the civil rights movement, look at whatever you're doing now for Gaza and Palestine. Now, I got to say, they're quoting somebody. I just realized that. At least it appears they're quoting somebody. If that's the case, I will put up on screen who they are quoting. But it's hard to argue with this. It's the indifference to life. It's the power imbalance. It's the pushing people out of where they live, the Nakba in 1948, and the continuation of that occupation, the continuation of the settlements, the apartheid, the different rights depending on if you're Palestinian or Israeli. This has been an ongoing issue well before the recent events on October 7th. So just at this point, I'm not sure who I'm trying to explain this to, because I think if you got into the end of this video, you probably already get it. But it's frustrating to see people that have the power, politicians, people that have the power to put a stop to this, just completely give in and not care. And hey, at the very least, their legacies are going to be tarnished for history because of their position right now.